Hey everyone, and welcome back to Captain Hunter's podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I truly appreciate the love and support that's going on. I'm not just saying that it's something to open up with, but I really appreciate it. Every time I check the statistics, the number of downloads is continually going up. So please continue to subscribe, to rate, and to share. Share it on Facebook, Twitter, send it through email. Just tell your friend, tell a neighbor, hey, check out this episode, tell me what you think, along those lines. Make sure that you are subscribing, whether you are listening on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Breaker, TuneIn, no matter what radio or internet platform that you're listening to this podcast on, please make sure that you subscribe, that you rate, and that you share. Also remember that I have changed the name from, as Captain Hunter's Podcast, I had the abbreviation CAPT period, Hunter's Podcast. Same name, except we're spelling it out, the full name, Captain Hunter's Podcast. So if somebody's going to Google it, make sure you put the whole name in, CAPTAIN Hunter's Podcast. So just as a reminder about that. The email is still the same, hunterpoliceconsulting@gmail.com. Please go over to the Patreon page. Please try to contribute to whatever we're doing. We're buying new equipment and just moving up and moving and advancing. And a lot of things are going to be happening within the next few weeks. So please look forward to those things. You can also support the podcast through Cash App, CPTL Hunter, Venmo, CPTL Hunter, PayPal, Lawrence Hunter, CPTL Hunter as well. I did have a friend of mine, Trent. I want to give a shout out to him. I'm going to get to a story that he gave to me through Facebook Messenger. So you can go over to my Facebook page, Lawrence Hunter, also LMH Police Training and Consulting. Drop me a message. And if there's a story you want me to talk about, or if there's a story that you want me to do, then I will be more than happy to talk about that. So today's episode is the monthly wrap-up, a new segment that we're going to be doing once a month, wrap-up for September 2019, just looking at most of the important stories that have happened throughout the month. I'm not going to talk about these stories in any particular order of importance and or of chronological order. So if I talk about something that happened at the beginning of the month or talk about the end of the month, it's just something that happened throughout the month. And once again, for the month of October, if there's something you want me to talk about or you come across a nice story, then just drop me a line. Drop me a line through Facebook. Drop me a line through Twitter, through Instagram, CPTL Hunter on both of those, Twitter and Instagram. Drop me a line through Facebook Messenger. Text me a story that you want me to talk about, and or if you have a topic you want me to talk about, and or if there's someone you want me to reach out to as a guest that you'd like to have on the show, I'd be more than happy to reach out to them and see if they will be guests on Captain Hunter's Podcast. So let's get into it. So obviously for the month of September, the first thing is that this is the month that we memorialize September 11th. 2001, 18 years ago. Obviously, many police officers, firefighters, and oftentimes we forget and neglect to remember that EMT personnel also died trying to save other people. So we've already remembered that the thousands of people, of civilians who died, and the numerous police officers, firefighters, EMT who perished in that tragic event on that day. Obviously, we're going to memorialize them. Next couple of stories that I want to talk about is, if you guys remember, I did a story about police militarization. I also talked about the Warrior versus Guardians. These are two previous episodes. Please go back and listen to those. I came across a couple of stories just in my routine, searching on the internet. I came across an article in time.com, and this was written by Bernard Kerik, September 8th, 2017. This is when this article came out. Kerik is a former commissioner of the New York Police Department and signatory to the Right on Crime Statements of Principles, whatever that is. So he wrote this article for time.com. The name of the article is ex-NYPD Commissioner, that's equivalent to their Chief of Police, Why President Trump is Right to Let Local Police Buy Military Equipment. He's obviously in favor of this militarization of the police that's going on. Now, he is obviously in opposition to myself, to many other progressive thinking law enforcement officials. Remember, I also had Chief David Cooper on. So this is it's really just a difference of opinion. And I do plan to reach out to Bernard B. Kerik. I do plan to reach out to him, see if he will be a guest on the podcast. I think that we are at the place where not just reading the articles, but want to actually have dialogue with these people. So as a result of this, I am going to reach out to him and see if he would explain to us his position. I explained it obviously in his Time Magazine article, but I'm also just want to see if he wants to have a nice little dialogue and see why we think so differently about this particular phenomenon. He talks about the 1033 program, and I'm just going to read just a little bit about this. The second paragraph in this article says, opposing the militarization of civilian law enforcement is well established across all political spectrums. but it is not universal. Policing is a very local issue and is best left as such. Now, I've railed against this in past episodes. He is right that policing is a very local issue, and that's part of the problem. What is done in Maine and what is done in Nebraska and what is done in Connecticut and what is done in Florida and what is done in Washington is, in my opinion, very wrong. If you are a citizen of the United States, then you ought to be treated the same in Michigan to Nebraska to Washington to Connecticut to Florida to Texas and all points in between. And so this is part of the problem, where the statutes and the right to be searched and seized and stopped and frisked can change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and this is part of the problem. This is what causes the use of force, and this is what causes the heightened incidences of uses of force. This is what causes this very local issue. He goes on to state that the federal government is not using the 1033 program to force law enforcement agencies to take military-grade weapons and equipment. So his point is that this is a voluntary type of program that police departments have to request for this type of equipment. And if your local municipality does not want it, then the government is not going to force it on you. Well, I agree with that. That's perfectly fine. And there's no issue or problem with that. However, the problem is for those communities who have requested this equipment and who do use it, most of the time they're using it against citizens of color. And there's a mission creep that goes along with that. And this is the problem that we're having. And once again, let me state for the record that I do not have any issue or problem with any police department having or forming military SWAT teams in an effort to handle emergency type situations. The problem, once again, is mission creep. When we start off with barricaded suspects, armed suspects, dangerous situations for police officers to get into, and eventually we go from that form of deployment into now we're actually deploying into situations where we are doing crowd control, and I'll talk about that in another article. We're doing, these SWAT teams are now doing crowd control. They're now in serving warrants. This becomes a problem. This is the problem that I have. Much of the equipment is germane to the role of local law enforcement, and it relieves the financial burden of acquisition of resource-limited agencies to a certain extent by using taxpayer-funded equipment in a repurposed role once it is no longer of value to the military. Federal distribution oversight problems are extremely concerning, but are only tangential to the local policing issue. Transparency in and oversight of the acquisition of military equipment belongs at the level of the jurisdiction employing it. If you go back to the previous episode where I talked about this whole problem that the United States military is just giving out this equipment and they don't know its effectiveness. So if they're giving out rocket launchers and grenade launchers, then if the government isn't following up to find out how this equipment is being utilized, then we don't know, the government doesn't know if they should continue to give this out. And his point here is that transparency and oversight of this type of military equipment belongs with the local jurisdiction. Well, I agree that somewhere somebody ought to be looking into how and why this equipment is being used, but I think it belongs to both. The federal government should not be giving out items that they don't know is going towards its actual mission and purpose. Remember, the mission and purpose of this equipment being given out is that, number one, is there's a overflow of armaments. Number one, I have a problem with that because our taxpayer dollars should be finely tuned, so there should be no overflow. That's number one. And number two, that the purpose should be towards the mission of the war on drugs. So if it's not a war on drugs, then one of those two reasons, the overflow and the war in application of this equipment should be towards the war on drugs, then I have an issue with this. And so he's saying the transparency and the oversight of it should belong with the local municipality, and they should ensure that any armaments are being used towards the war on drugs. I will agree with that. I think that both entities, the United States federal government as well as the local city administration, should also make sure that the armaments are used for exactly what they should be used for. He goes on to state that in these emergency type of situations, right, the San Bernardino incident, the Pulse nightclub incident in Orlando, Florida, that it would have been good to have this type of equipment. And I'm not going to dispute that. I think in emergency situations, then we need to call in the big boys and they need to do what they need to do. And I don't have any problem with, once again, any type of organization or department having access to this type of equipment. But Does every single city and town need this type of equipment? Remember, I gave my own analysis of what was going on in my own jurisdiction. Our MRAP was part of an organization and part of a regional team. Maybe some of these departments don't need their own. They should just join a regional team. I mean, how often are we running into San Bernardino's, into the Pulse nightclub incident, or into the North Hollywood type shooting or the bank robbery? How often are these situations occurring? Not very often. And once again, let me say it for the record again, I want us to be prepared and I want us to be protected. And then he goes on to say that the misuse of military equipment, whether during protests or parades, is the responsibility of the law enforcement agency using it, not those who supplied it. I don't agree with that. I think that if I, as a parent, have some scissors, I need to make sure that if my child wants to use the scissors, I need to make sure that he is being responsible with those scissors. Now, the scissors are obviously a tool and an instrument for cutting paper. And if he asked me for the scissors and I asked him previously to that, are you just going to use that to cut paper? And he answers yes. And then I give him the scissors. Okay, then that's no problem or issues. The issue comes in when I see him running around the house chasing his sister with those scissors. I, as a parent, have a duty and an obligation to step in and to stop him from doing that. Well, I think that the government also has a duty and obligation to make sure that the equipment that is being utilized and that is being given away is being utilized for its exact purposes in which it was given out. And once again, the exact purposes of the 1033 program is to fight the war on drugs, period. Not for crowd control and anything like that. So that's very important. So once again, I'm going to reach out to Mr. Carrick, see if he'll be on the podcast. So stay tuned for that. And another article, now that article was written in 2017. This is from policemag.com, and this is called Answering SWAT Critics. Now, I came across this article in September. It was actually written in August 16, 2019 by David Griffith. I'm also going to reach out to him, but he also has an article in here, The Progressives, those who are trying to stop the militarization of the police. Now, he lists a number of different factors. One of them, he says, is the money crunch. SWAT critics also argue that many agencies would be better off spending their money on patrol officers rather than training and equipping specialty teams. That argument is really easy to answer because only about 10% of law enforcement tactical teams nationwide are full-time units. Most SWAT officers are working other duties, even on some agencies that are full-time teams. Some officers are being assigned to patrol. Defining the mission, another problem that he has. While most county or city officials and even some police critics believe SWAT has a role in contemporary police operations, they disagree on what that role should be. And often it is that disagreement that leads to calls to cut funding for the teams and to restrict their use only for the most critical incidents. So once again, this is defining the mission. Such definition is flexible enough to account for the new threats such as international terrorism after 9/11, but it can leave a lot to interpretation, and that's why critics say SWAT has become a hammer that law enforcement is swinging at too many nails. Cries of overuse are common concern from civil libertarians and anti-police activists. So he quotes a guy named Sid Heal, who was a retired commander of the LA County Sheriff's Department Special Enforcement Bureau and the current executive director of the California Tactical Officers Association. He quotes this guy who says it's not a bad idea to restrict SWAT to certain operations, and he argues against mission creep. SWAT teams have a role, and when they are deployed in situations that would make their legitimacy questioned, that can be seen as overkill. The controversy this creates far exceeds the specific benefits of that one instance and taints the entire concept, he explains. So part of this mission creep is talked about crowd control. So SWAT teams are being used for crowd control. Talks about the warrant service in controversy. But in answer to the critics who say SWAT should not be used to serve warrants for nonviolent drug suspects, all of the tactical police experts contacted with this story pointed out that the press and public are not always aware of what information was used to determine why SWAT should serve a drug warrant. The risk involved in a particular warrant service is not always apparent from the nature of the offense, they say. I'm a firm believer that SWAT should be used for high-risk warrants, violent crime search warrants, and drug warrants because drugs and guns go together. He quotes another high-ranking police tactical expert. So that's an article that was in Police Mag. You guys can read that. But I do plan to reach out to both of these particular entities, just kind of talk about their opinions. I talked about a new law in California, previously praised them for their passing of AB 392 concerning the change in the use of force when an officer can use force being that standard that which was previously reasonable, when a reasonable officer believed at the time of his decision to pull the trigger or use some type of deadly force, has now been changed to necessary. So they being the state out there, or any judge will now have to take a look at the events leading up to the actual pulling of the trigger. So they went from reasonable into necessary. Is what the officer did at the particular time that he pulled the trigger or used some deadly measures necessary? Could he or she have done something differently? So I praise them for that. So now what they've also done is now they have made it, California allows public to refuse to help law enforcement. This is from the New York Times. I don't know how I feel about this as far as a moral standard. Now, I talked about this in a video that I did, brief video clip that I did, but also in a blog that I did, LMH Police Training and Consulting. Please go over there and check out the blog. Make sure you guys subscribe. LMH Police Training and Consulting. I also have a blog over there. Please make sure that you check it out and subscribe to that blog. But the governor out there signed a law. Previous to this law, the state could arrest someone for refusing to help a police officer. So someone saw a police officer on the side of the road fighting with someone, and the officer said, "Hey, you over there, come over there and help me arrest this person." If the person refused to come to the assistance and to the aid of the police officer, then the officer could arrest that particular person. This is no more. And the legislatures who decided to change this law looked at the Posse Comitatus Act of 1872. Now, many of these laws that went into effect had to do with slave catching, and they had to do with suppressing minority populations, be they the Native Americans or the minority black population. So what is Posse Comitatus? And I hope I'm saying that right. I'm no Latin scholar. The phrase Posse Comitatus can be translated as force of the county. The ability of local law enforcement officials to summon civilians to keep the peace is an idea that has roots in England. In the United States, Southern officials invoked Posse Comitatus in the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which said that civilians could be recruited to capture people who were trying to escape from slavery. But the phrase has also been used to prohibit federal military intervention in local affairs. In the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878, a piece of federal legislation that is still on the books. At the county level, Posse Comitatus was a way for local sheriffs to keep the peace in places where law enforcement was informal or poorly funded, as was when the case for the western frontiers of the United States during the 1800s. So the law out there changed, and it had its roots in England. It had its roots in slave catching. It had its roots, as this article continues to go on to say, in underfunded police departments and things like that. How do I feel about it? Well, first of all, if I'm an ordinary citizen with no training, no experience, and a police officer summons me to come over there and help, I may have come off of a long job. I may have other place to be. And if that's the case, and that's a situation and scenario, should I be arrested because I have other place to be? Maybe I'm not physically capable of fighting. I personally have heart disease. So if I am being summoned to come to someone's assistance, could I be arrested for that and have to go to court and answer why I didn't come to a police officer's aid? Now, let me be very clear once again and say, this is where my ambiguity on this particular law comes in at, is that I don't feel that it's okay for the government to impose my time and my energy and my efforts. I ought to want to help police officers. I ought to want to help my fellow man. And as I said in my blog, that the same community that makes it okay if I'm in an emergency situation and the police officer can't by himself until backup arrives can't handle the situation. If the community is okay with other people walking by and not helping, then one day that will swing back on me, right? So if I'm okay with not helping police officers, then I have to understand that one day I have to be okay with not receiving that help. So this is it's a catch-22. I do want to live in a society where people want to help the police officers. I think you ought to want to help bring people into justice. I'm also not in favor of arresting people, making them take a day off from work and give an answer as to why they did not come to the aid of a police officer. So it's a catch-22, but I think that was worth kind of discussing. It looks as if the family of Stephon Clark is going to reach some kind of settlement. The family is going to get $2.4 million. What is life worth for making a mistake? There was a previous article that I came across. It's in The Guardian. U.S. sheriff once said it was financially better to kill than badly injure suspects. Donnie Youngblood made comments during 2006 campaign for sheriff of Kern County, which has the highest rate of police killings in the United States. This article was written in 2018. You know what happens when a guy makes a bad shooting on someone and then kills them? $3 million and the family goes away after a long back and forth, Youngblood said. He went on to say, which way do you think is better financially, to cripple them or to kill them for the county? An unidentified man off screen said, kill them, to which Youngblood replied, absolutely, because if they're crippled, we get to take care of them for life, and the cost goes way up. That's in The Guardian. U.S. Sheriff once said it's financially better to kill than to injure suspects. Once again, this shows the crazy warrior mentality on steroids. And so the family of Stephon Clark is going to get $2.4 million. Obviously, I feel terrible about that. I don't think any amount of money really can bring any type of real satisfaction to the case. It certainly won't bring your lost loved one back. Hopefully the changes that have been made by the California legislature will curb this type of incident, as well as, and also let's keep in mind that other states are following suit. Camden Police Department has now developed a new policy concerning the use of force, very strict, very stringent. Other governors are also looking into similar types of legislature. So let's just hope that this trend is going on in California will certainly catch on across the country. As I'm recording this, I'm watching the Amber Geiger trial. Amber Geiger was the police officer in Dallas, Texas, who opened up the wrong apartment door, entered into that apartment, and then shot Botham Jean, shot him dead and killed him. She, as a police officer, had just gotten off duty. She got off duty and she lived on the 3rd floor, I believe. Botham Jean lived on the 4th floor. She got off on the wrong floor, parked in the wrong place. She got out of her car and walked past 16 doors, apparently 16 other apartments, and opened up the wrong door. And according to her own testimony, which I watched today, she said that she opened up the door. She saw and heard a figure moving around. She then drew her weapon and said, show me your hands, show me your hands. The gentleman then said something, and then he began to advance on her, and then she said she shot him. And while he was still a fair distance away, this is her own testimony, she shot him because she was scared. She was crying during the testimony, some parts of it. I did reach out to a criminal defense attorney down there who's been covering the trial for one of the News Channel 8's affiliates. So hopefully when the trial is over, I will have him on the podcast and we can talk about the trial and see, his thoughts and his feelings and his reactions. There was a lead investigator. This is from abcnews.go. A lead investigator in wrong apartment killing says he doesn't believe Amber Geiger committed a crime. The stunning pronouncement by Texas Ranger David Armstrong, the lead homicide investigator on the high-profile case, came while he was under cross-examination by an attorney for fired police officer Amber Geiger, but not while the jury was present in the courtroom. After finishing your investigation and looking at the totality of the circumstances and considering everything, do you believe today that you have probable cause to believe that Amber Geiger committed a crime? Defense attorney Robert Rogers asked Armstrong, who replied, based on the totality of the circumstances, based on a complete investigation, no, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, according to this police officer, according to this lead homicide investigator, you can, in the state of Texas, narrow it down to there, walk into a stranger's home, mistakenly, draw your firearm, shoot them, and there should be no criminal charges brought against you. Certainly he can't be saying that. He certainly can't mean that. I truly believe that there's a lot of deference, a lot of preference has been given to Ms. Geiger because she is a police officer. But we have to understand that police officers are not above the law. There are many problems with Amber Geiger's testimony. Number one, she gave one-handed CPR. Now, anyone who's ever taken any type of CPR class will understand that you're supposed to do two-hand CPR. You're supposed to give your full attention. You're not supposed to leave the person who begun to do CPR on. Leaving that person is called abandonment. So you can't do that. She abandoned Mr. Jean a number of times while he was bleeding to death. She claims that she left him to go check the door, but the prosecutor grilled her about this and said, no, you actually left a couple of times. You actually stopped performing CPR a number of times in order to send a couple of text messages asking for your partner to get there and please hurry up. She had very little to no blood on her uniform, suggesting she didn't do very much. She also had combat gauze in her bag that she carried, which was unused. She had rubber gloves on her duty belt that were also unused. Just a lot of problems. She didn't do everything that she could to save his life. Not that it would have done anything. According to what I understand, the bullet actually pierced the man's heart, so he was going to die regardless. But she also didn't do everything. And actually, I got to be honest, she's in a panic state of mind. She probably walked in there, realized what happened, and it was really just kind of in a messed up state of mind. She also didn't use any de-escalation techniques. She went to de-escalation classes back in April. Didn't do anything, right? De-escalation is important because you see someone who's advancing towards you. What de-escalation techniques should you be employing? She didn't employ any. And this presents a problem. When we talk about police reform, when we talk about bringing the police and the community together, they have to know that this type of training, that the training that police officers are getting is actually working. And if you can't apply it in your own life, how is it supposed to be applied in anyone else's life? So here you are confronted with an issue. You're a trained police officer, 5 years in a job, you're in a high stress situation, and you start to panic. You don't employ any of these techniques, and this is a problem. They want us to trust. They, the public, want us, the police officers, even though I'm not one anymore, I still talk like that and think like that. They still want us, still want officers to know and to believe that this stuff is working. And here it is in a real life situation, real high stress panic situation, you can't employ these type of techniques. This presents a problem and it loses the confidence of the public. So this de-escalation training, implicit bias training, all these different cultural types of sensitivity types of training, de-escalation, implicit bias, racial sensitivity, you name the type of training, here's where it's supposed to matter. You're supposed to de-escalate the situation. And if it didn't matter then, in these high stress situations, when it's supposed to matter. If officers are taking racial sensitivity classes, implicit bias trainings, cultural diversity type of trainings, and then they are yet members of the KKK and they got stuff in their lockers and stuff, and they're posting stuff on the internet, when is the public supposed to believe what we're saying? So Amber Geiger certainly didn't do everything she could have and should have done in order to save this man's life. And this training didn't kick in at the time it should have, and this is a problem. When this trial ends, I will be reaching out once again to the criminal defense attorney who's been giving updates on the News 8 affiliate down there in Dallas, Texas. So we'll hope to have him on the podcast when this trial is over. It is my assumption and many other experts' assumption that Ms. Geiger will be found not guilty of murder, manslaughter, reckless endangerment, reckless killing, whatever the charges are against her down there. And listen, I don't want people to get in trouble, but there has to be a price paid for people making mistakes. You can't make a mistake and where people lose their life. And once again, I think that this falls back on a lot of training. We're too quick to go to the gun. You're too quick to say, I'm scared, and just start blowing off rounds. According to her own testimony, Botham Jean was still a ways away. He was not like he was within 1 or 2 feet of her. And I understand closing the distance. I understand the 18-foot rule. The 18-foot rule and 21-foot rules states essentially that if someone is holding a knife or is holding some deadly instrument, they can be upon you. If they're 18 to 21 feet away, they can still be upon you before you have time to draw your weapon and react. I understand that. Still, get on the ground, turn on some lights, figure out what's going on. There's still time, according to so I didn't work out the math and all that, but I did teach defensive tactics, so I'm very much aware of adrenaline dumps and the narrowing of the vision, every other physiological phenomenon that is going on with the human body that Ms. Geiger probably was feeling at the time. But you have to be sure, in saying I'm scared because there's a figure, because there's a great big guy around, can't continue to fly. But we'll find out what the jury says. Let's head on over to NRA and let's spend some time over there. Once again, shout out to my man Trent. He sent me an article. The first article that I'm going to read is from Trent. And this says that NRA was foreign asset to Russia ahead of 2016. New Senate report reveals. This is from npr.org. You guys can read this. This was released September 27, 2019. A little bit from this article. Drawing on contemporaneous emails and private interviews, an 18-month probe by Senate Finance Committee Democratic staff found that the NRA underwrote political access for Russian nationals Maria Butina and Alexander Torshin more than previously known, even though the two had declared their ties to the Kremlin. The NRA Vice President Pete Brownell, who would later become NRA President, was enticed to visit Russia with the promise of personal business opportunities, and the NRA covered a portion of the trip's costs. The conclusions on the Senate investigation could have legal implications for the NRA. Their tax-exempt status could be gone. tax-exempt organizations are barred from using funds for the personal benefit of its officials or for actions significantly outside their stated missions. Of course, the Republican Party said this whole investigation has been overblown. Nothing that these individuals did, nothing that NRA officials did, should have any bearing upon their tax-exempt status. In the Republicans' analysis of Wyden's report, the majority argued that it does not account for U.S.-Russian relations at the time and contains no exclusionary innuendo, and repeatedly attempts to paint a picture that does not exist. The point here, Mr. Republican, is that this is just more proof and gives more to the credibility that the Russians have always been trying to infiltrate political atmosphere of the United States through voting and even through the NRA, trying to influence NRA officials into gearing and steering the elections and those who are running for office into a certain way, getting them to do business in Russia, and therefore having some type of political influence. Of course, I'm sure that these people understand that. They just choose to ignore it. So essentially what this report is saying is that the NRA officials were enticing and coordinating with Russian officials, people who were tied to the Kremlin, and they were acting as their assets, and the NRA was being in cahoots with them, and they were showering them with gifts and everything like that. So you guys can go up there to npr.org, read that over that. If you go to npr.org, you can download the full 77-page report. Just a little bit more about what was going on. The Senate report notes that in 2018, the NRA spokeswoman Dana Loesch, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce her last name, Loesch, repeatedly denied that the group leaders in a 2015 trip to Moscow was sanctioned by the gun rights group. But in a letter obtained by the committee that then NRA President Alan Kors wrote to Torsion on NRA letterhead after consulting with NRA staff and former NRA President David Keene. Kors designated 2 NRA figures to lead the trip. Dave Keene and top NRA donor Joe Gregory will represent the NRA and our 5 million members better than anyone else, he wrote. During the course of the investigation, Brownell's lawyer also told the committee that Brownell believed the trip was an official NRA event. This view is further strengthened by the committee's evidence that NRA staff prepared itineraries, gathered briefing materials, applied for tourist visas, paid for some travel expenses, and provided the delegation with NRA gifts to give to Russian officials. Is that what your NRA funds are going for? Trips to Russia? Trips to talk to the Russian people? So listen, check out that article. Props to Trent for sending me that. You know, what happened to the time when all these Republicans who are so in love with the Reagan administration, who loathed working with the Russians? Now, listen, we're all human beings. The Russians are human beings as well. I believe that we should have some type of friendly interaction with them. But you can't go around undercutting the United States in order to get what you want and what you need. NRA leaders were seeking for business opportunities. And now the author of the bill, Senator Wyden from Oregon, wants a full IRS probe to see if there was any funny business, if they actually took your dues money and used their dues money to entice Russian officials over there. So let's stick with the NRA and let's talk about how San Francisco passes a resolution labeling NRA a domestic terrorist organization. This is from Blue Lives Matter. For anyone who doesn't know, I reached out to Blue Lives Matter. I reached out to them trying to get them to be on the podcast, or at least a representative from them to be on the podcast, because I want to talk about their co-opting the name Black Lives Matter. So I reached out to them, sent a couple emails, have not heard anything back. On their own website, Blue Lives Matter, they wrote an article, San Francisco passes resolution labeling NRA domestic terrorist organization. I don't think that this resolution is going to go anywhere. Certainly, I don't think that the mayor of the city of San Francisco is going to sign it. I believe the article says that as well. And certainly it's not going to go anywhere else as far as the state. It is interesting to me that Blue Lives Matter would put this on. What does Blue Lives Matter and the NRA have in common? Wonder why they would post something like that. Very interesting why Blue Lives Matter, concerned about the lives of police officers, why would they post an article about the NRA being labeled a terrorist organization? That's very interesting. The NRA is pro-police. It raises a lot of concerns in my mind. It's concerning the nexus between Blue Lives Matter and the NRA. Very interesting. I'd like to hear your thoughts as to why an organization that is dedicated to getting information out there about police lives, how much they matter, police violence, And if they were really concerned, matter of fact, let me pull up this article from Salon.com. And it says, if Blue Lives Matter, how come conservatives won't back gun control to save cops? Very interesting, this nexus, this problem that we're having, right? So Blue Lives Matter, that's what the mantra says. We care about cops' lives. Then why won't they, as Salon is asking, and I'm asking the same question, why won't they back any type of legislation that gets more guns off the street? Very interesting question. No, but they're not doing that. They're actually posting articles about the ridiculous, and I do agree that it's ridiculous, measure that San Francisco, the legislative body in San Francisco, took in labeling the NRA a terrorist organization. I believe that's silly and ridiculous, not going to go anywhere. But it does send a point and does send about where they stand, the city of San Francisco stands, at least the administrative body there, stands concerning gun activists. If Blue Lives really matter, and we want to save cops' lives, then let's get some guns off the street. And that's where that article comes from in Salon. And that article was written back in August of 2019. Very interesting. From policeone.com, San Diego approves mental health program for first responders. The program, named after Cal Fire Captain Ryan Mitchell, will connect first responders with mental health specialists via the website, phone, or app. This is good news. A lot of police departments, Connecticut adopted something similar where they're trying to get police officers to help mental and physical wellness that they need. So I think that that's good that San Diego is going to be using technology, websites, phone applications. I read off on another previous podcast that I did, numerous numbers, some mental health aspects you can text. So I think that this is good news. And so in our last story we're going to talk about for the month of September is the ridiculous Michigan officer who was fired for having a KKK application in his home. It was framed and up on the wall. He also had Confederate placemats. From the New York Times, this says Michigan police officer is terminated after KKK application was found in his home. A prospective home buyer found Confederate flags and a framed Ku Klux Klan application in the officer's house in Holton, Michigan. This officer is Charles Anderson. He was working with the Muskegon Police Department in Michigan, and he was terminated. Here's the problem that I have, and I wrote this in my blog, and I just want to know what your thoughts and opinions are. And I asked this question on my blog, LMH Police Training and Consulting. Go over to that blog. Check that out. I asked a question, how many do you think it is? How many people do you think saw this? This man was married and had a wife. Doesn't say if he had kids. So if the man had kids, did the kids ever see this? Did they think anything strange of Confederate placemats and a KKK poster on the wall? What about the in-laws? Did they see it? Did nobody ever say anything about this? How many parties did this man have? How many Thanksgivings were celebrated in his home? Christmases, Easters, anniversaries, birthdays. How many people and friends and family came over to this man's home and saw these Confederate memorabilia around his home? How many police officers or friends of his came to his home? Did they come over to his house for anything? Did they ever have a beer at his home watching the game? How many people saw this? Friends, families, family members, in-laws. How many other people saw this memorabilia in this man's home and said nothing? The only time that anyone said anything about this is when there were a black family that was looking to buy a home. And this black family went into the home, and this man obviously was selling his home. And this black family went into the home as prospective buyers, saw the memorabilia, and then got out of the home. But I got to ask again, how many people saw this prior to the black family seeing it? Even the realtor didn't think to tell this man to take this stuff down. That shows you the blind spot that many people have concerning this issue of race in this country. The realtor doesn't say, this memorabilia might be a problem. Why don't you take it down while we try to sell this home? Maybe they live in such a community where there are so little minorities that the thought never crossed anyone's mind that this is a problem. He obviously worked in the police department and had interactions with people of a different color, but yet these are the sympathies that he had. And this is the problem that many people have when it comes to law enforcement. This continues to be a stain in the black eye. And I know no matter what I say in this podcast, no matter how many articles are written, no matter how many times you see it on CNN or MSNBC or any other podcast or any other news outlet, there's still people right now who are going to have this memorabilia in their home. They're going to buy it. They're going to sell it. They're going to cherish it. And they're not going to do anything about it because these are their sympathies. And it's not just limited to law enforcement. These are teachers, fire officers, doctors, lawyers, politicians who have these sympathies and sentiments. You don't know what's going on in somebody's home. You don't know what they have in their closet. So I'm glad that this man is no longer on the force. He was on the force for 20 years. 20 years he was on the force. We don't know how long he was living in that particular home, how long he had this memorabilia, but it had to be for some time. I ask the question again, how long did this man have this stuff in his home? How long did he have it? How many other people saw it and said nothing? Even the realtor didn't say anything. Absolutely ridiculous. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we got to talk about for today. This is just a monthly wrap up. I will be releasing another episode with Dr. Dawn Perlmutter very shortly, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hit me up in CPTL Hunter, Captain L Hunter on Twitter, CPTL Hunter on Instagram. Please send me your stories through Facebook. Send me the stories through Instagram, through Twitter, through email. Please support the podcast. Do what you can to support the podcast. I'm trying to give you guys some good quality content. I got some great episodes coming up with some good interviews. I think you're really going to like them. As I said, I got Dr. Dawn Perlmutter. She deals with symbolism and ritualistic crimes. That's going to be released very soon. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, much love and peace. Take care. That's it. Bye.